What's going on, y'all? This is Alexander, and you are plugged in to the Nerd Companion. Cold question. If you could choose any Jedi or Sith to be your master, like you are the pupil, you are the Padawan, who would you choose?
Luke Skywalker.
Really? Why?
Why? Because Luke Skywalker is the Jedi.
He is the Jedi.
He is the Jedi.
Gotcha.
Right? At least growing up, that was the Jedi.
Okay.
That was the Jedi for me.
Okay.
That's who I wanted to be, you know? Are you a Luke or a Han guy?
Luke or Han?
Yeah.
That's hard. That depends on my mood. I can't... Oh, I'm very good at making difficult answers for simple questions. I think too deeply about things. I appreciate them both. I think that there is a position for them both, depending on the situation. But
that's the most neutral Star Wars answer.
I know. That depends on the question you're asking me. I don't know. Like who could kill who? I mean, Luke would obviously destroy Han. If I am caught in a scuffle, I'm probably going to choose Han. I mean, I don't know. Damn. Like if who's going to be my mentor out of those two?
Well, it's always like when you're a kid, it's like, who do you want to be?
Oh,
you know?
Luke Skywalker. I mean, he was the protagonist. He was. I mean, Han was cool. You know, I definitely was like, he's a cool dude. You need that guy in your party for sure.
Yeah.
But definitely Luke. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't want to be Luke?
Right.
You're watching.
At least a lot of people, you know, growing up, a lot of friends were like, you know, Luke's kind of plain Jane, you know, white bread type thing, because he's just like the hero, you know. And Star Wars is not a complicated story, especially in the beginning.
Oh, for sure.
You know, it's a very regular hero's journey. You know, it followed like the basic formula. And so everybody wanted to kind of be Han, at least when I was growing up, that kids wanted to be Han because he was cool, you know, he got the girl, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then Luke was just kind of had to do the hero protagonist. But for me, I don't know, I always identified with the hero, you know, growing up.
No, Luke's cool, for sure. I definitely like Luke a lot. I don't think you can have the story without either one. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
All three of them are like central, you know, the core three of Luke, Han, and Leia,
right?
Like what makes Star Wars stars. They've been trying to replicate that ever since, you know, is that thing.
Absolutely. I think that's probably, that question's a good example for anyone to differentiate what kind of Star Wars fan you are, right?
Yeah.
When someone asks me, like, you know, what do you like most about Star Wars? And to me, the defining characteristic that separates Star Wars from any other sci-fi / fantasy is the majesticness of the Force.
Right.
And that's what drew me into Star Wars. It wasn't because it was Han. It was the Force. It was the lightsaber.
Yeah,
it was the Force. Like, those are the things.
Absolutely. Do you remember like how you got introduced to Star Wars?
Absolutely. My mother... I don't remember it was a long... I remember I would watch the VHS.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when my mom told me they re-released the VHSs as the trilogy, the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly that I would sit down in front of the couch, not on the couch, and she was a teacher. Mm-hmm. And so she had boxes of like, you know, textbooks and where she put her papers. Like that was their method of carrying stuff around to school. She had an extra box and she cut out, like if you flip the box where the opening is on top, she cut it in a U shape. And so she flipped it upside down. So it was like this cardboard box tray. And then she would put my food on this plate and I would watch Star Wars on VHS in front of the TV while I'm sure she was like grading papers or whatever.
Yeah.
But I vividly remember that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have been like 3, 4, or 5 years old.
Yeah.
Like those are probably some of my earliest memories. It's funny you asked that question. Like, if I can remember anything, what's yours?
Similar situation. I think watching like A New Hope was the first movie memory I have. Like it's really hard when you're that young to like really remember and, you know, tone down. Like I remember seeing Jurassic Park in theaters.
You got to see that in theaters.
Yeah, I know. I remember the theater and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure the first thing I remember watching is a VHS copy of Star Wars that my dad introduced me to. And I remember we had this it was an old VHS all three of them, and I still have it at home.
Oh my God.
And it's it's not like you can never watch them. I don't have I don't have a VHS.
You put that in the case, man. You put it in a glass case somewhere.
But like it had like the little fold out, sections on the side and things like that. So I remember that super vividly, and I became a Star Wars fan, I guess, from that. I mean, as much as like a 6-year-old, can be a Star Wars fan,
right.
And things like that. And then I remember going to see, when they came out with the special editions, going with my dad to the theater to watch them.
I don't remember if I went to go see those. I'm sure I did, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I remember that. And then, of course, that led to, when episode 1 came out. I remember still... the trailer.
Well, hold on. So before we get on, all that was to ask the cold question, the cold opening question. Who are you? What's your name?
My name's Jerod. I work with you, as a paramedic, and I love Star Wars.
Hell yeah, brother. Yeah. Hell yeah. Last cold question. Just thought about it as you were just saying that. If you were going to introduce Star Wars to a new person, what is the watching order in which you would recommend for them to watch?
4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9.
Okay. I would say, and this is the way I did it for my wife, is 4, 5. After you find out who Vader is, go back to 1, 2, 3, then watch 6, then go 7, 8, 9.
I think if you mix in the prequel trilogy at the wrong time because of how different they look, and especially with younger generations.
Oh, for sure.
So you got to have them learn the majesty of like 70s, early 80s,
because you can't go back.
Effects,
you can't go back.
Like that. And like, for us, nostalgia kind of kicks in a little bit, and also we understand the craft of like what they did back then. Problem is that like if you don't do that with like a kid, with like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, the prequel stuff, like they're just going to be like, this looks so much better.
I don't want to watch this, Dad. What is this? Yeah. Turner Classic Movies?
Yeah.
No, I think I did it with my son too. Yeah. We definitely watched the old ones first.
Yeah. What does your son think?
Oh, he's absolutely obsessed.
Good.
Absolutely obsessed.
Yeah. I always wonder, like, because I don't have kids, so I always kind of wonder, does it hold the same, like, grip on, like, younger kids as it used to? Like, I know when 7, 8, 9 did, it definitely gripped kids. It was a phenomenon and stuff. But now that we're a few years after that,
It's weird. I would say probably... He's always a big fan of what we're watching at the time. So if we're watching, like, 4, 5, 6, he likes Vader, the Stormtroopers, and Luke. When we're watching, the 1, 2, 3, it's, Anakin...
Yeah.
And then he hasn't even watched the last 3. He's only watched the first one. But everyone likes Kylo Ren. No. But I hold my own opinions about Kylo.
So with the original trilogy, first off, which is your favorite?
Man, I have to say Empire. But I don't think you'd have Empire without Hope. You know what I mean?
No,
but Empire's the one.
Yeah, I mean, it's 4 and 5 in some order. For me, it's Empire as well. Empire's just the best of the movies.
What was it about Empire that was just like, oh my God, this is it?
I think it's obviously the twist, because the first time you saw it, and this is back in the, when we saw it, like it's not like you had internet, that you could, internet was kind of around, but you didn't really
internet ruined show business.
Yeah. I mean, you can't have, all the spoilers are already out there and things like that. But the biggest twist in cinematic history, seeing that for the first time as like a 7-year-old, and it just, your mind's blown and your little tiny brain can't comprehend it.
I don't even think I registered it.
Yeah. I know.
I was just like, what?
Yeah.
And my mom's like trying to explain it. And I'm like, but what?
Right.
What do you mean? He didn't know his dad? Like, like, what are you talking about? Right. I know my dad.
Yeah. But that, and then, I think the beginning of that movie on Hoth and stuff like that, on the Ice Planet, is just amazing. And some of the best parts of Star Wars are right there. And then obviously Yoda gets introduced, and Yoda and the whole.
That's right. Thing. He's not in A New Hope.
No, he's not at all. Yeah. They don't meet
Not
him.
even a voice. No, he's not.
No. It's not till because they see on Hoth, he gets the image of Obi-Wan in ghost form, like his
right.
goes, talking to him.
Right.
And that's when he's like, you have to go train with Yoda, the Jedi.
Golly, those all blurred together.
I know, right? It's been so long, and we've seen Star Wars so many times that it all just kind of goes. So yeah, 5 obviously I think is the best, but like if you said 4, I wouldn't hate you for it, because I understand 4 is probably the most iconic, and then 6 is like there's a decent drop off, mainly probably because of the Ewoks.
Yeah. I think the thing that did it for me was the way that everything ended. I feel like if you're going to build a trilogy, and I feel like in any story at all, if you're going to build a series, I feel like you need to leave things off where like you're throwing everything up in the air and then you just cut it. Because to me, this like you can have certain closure at some point, like in to some degree with certain of the mini plots. But I think if we're going over the grand arc, I think you need to throw that thing up there and cut it, because that's what's going to make me be like, hold on, dude. Like, I need more. I don't know. People are like, oh, that's I hate that because, you know, it makes me, you know, the way they feel about it. But I feel like that's what it's supposed to make you feel like.
Yeah.
Like you want to. I'm looking forward for the next one. I need to know.
I think the original trilogy, I think you hit on a good point, is what makes it so great and what makes it one of the best film trilogies of all time, you know, is the fact that, like you said, the story that they're telling in those 3 movies is wrapped up. Like, you don't, you know, it's like Vader's redeemed, the Empire's, you know, the Emperor's dead. You know, you have for like
Order Z.
Yeah, lots of thoughts about that. But like it's wrapped up, and so you feel, you know, no matter what age you are, like when you're younger and you're not you know, getting all super complex ideas about, you know, tyranny and like all the other things, or like what this means or what that means, or, you know, all the things that you think of as you get older. It's still a perfectly wrapped trilogy. And then as you get older, and also just as you watch them more and more, it makes you want more. Like you said, it's a perfect like beginning, middle, and end with those 3 movies. But you're still like, man, like what happened to the Jedi? Does Luke rebuild the Jedi? You know, like what happens with Han and Leia? You know, is the Republic like, does it just happen like at the drop of the hat? You know, and things like that. And, you know, obviously, you know, at one point Lucas wanted to make, you know, sequel trilogy. Didn't really happen for a lot of different reasons. But then he, you know, with expanded universe stuff, you know, which is all, you know, taken away and decanonized now and is part of the Legends universe and stuff. Duh. But they told those stories, you know, in novel form, in comic book form sometimes, and things like that. But like those books, you know, growing up as a kid, like that was, you know, that was like some of my favorite books growing up, because it told like the Thrawn trilogy and, you know, the Emperor Reborn stuff and like how they got there. Luke got married and like the
shame, Luke, you knew better. It's against the code.
I don't know. Mar is amazing. You know? No, that's the whole thing. And so like you got to see how his version of the Jedi changed and like how things, you know, got better going forward. So I think that, you know, the original trilogy is unassailable in so many ways. Obviously groundbreaking, obviously changed movies forever. Like,
oh, absolutely.
You know, the way we have movies now and like blockbusters, and the idea of a summer blockbuster, you know, is kind of like, it was there with like Jaws and some of the other movies beforehand. But I mean, Star Wars like did it. Like Star Wars is what made everything else like tick in Hollywood. It changed Hollywood for better and worse going forward.
Yeah, I had a, you know, obviously I wasn't around when the first one was released, but I had in my senior year of high school, for as little as I did attend, it was a math class. I can't remember what I took because I was half there. But he was an immigrant from the Philippines, and he said he first moved here. And his dad had taken him to Star Wars on opening night. He was saying that he remembered that his dad was talking about how he didn't really have any high hopes for it because it kind of just came out of left field. And he told me when he saw that, it literally changed his life. And he remembered everyone couldn't stop talking about it. Like this was like the sci-fi magnum opus of its time.
Yeah.
And he was even saying that his dad like was super into it, and they had no like they just became a slave, you know, for this story that came out of nowhere. And him,
Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, it was saying like too that he was and I think you know, him being an immigrant and like not having a lot in common with people around him, and then having this thing that he did truly love, but also everyone else loved, and that was kind of like his key into
it's like a way into American society as an outsider,
right? Yeah. And he was just like how integral it was in his life, and to me, I feel like everyone has that kind of story.
Yeah,
that at least those that love Star Wars, like legitimately love it. Like there's some sort of thing that you just really can't put words to when you watch it. It's just raw emotion. You just get caught up in it.
I absolutely agree. I think, the first moment that like you see the crawl and then you see, for the first time the Star Destroyer fly over. Like
the shadow.
There's so many,
like, oh god.
So it's just a tingle up your spine, and like there's so many stories of people seeing it for the first time. Whether it was like our parents, my dad told me, seeing it for the first time in theaters and having that feeling, and then like old, now like established people in Hollywood talking about it and like remembering seeing that, for the first time, and how they're just your mind was blown. Like nobody had done anything like that before. 2001: A Space Odyssey had been around before then. And
I still have not seen it. Is that a solid recommendation?
It's a type of movie where don't expect it to.
Is it a psychological thriller?
No, it's. I mean, there are.
That's what they make it seem like.
There are parts of it like that. It's very esoteric. It's a lot of like high ideas and things like that. But visually, it's stunning no matter what. But that's why 2001 was a masterpiece in a way of high art, but like it didn't connect in the way Star Wars did to the regular population, because Star Wars combined those visuals with like a very
specific narrative.
Yeah, specific, more generic, easier to digest story. And those two combinations like blew the doors off.
Gotcha. So you're saying like Space Odyssey is definitely like a more, not to say that it's high art, but it was definitely like cerebral in a sense that you can't just put it on and kind of watch it, doing dishes and stuff.
No. It's something you have to sit down and watch. There's weird parts of it and things like that.
Have to check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Sometimes it's not, a lot of people are like, I don't really understand what's going on with it. And, even today, it's not something that I want to watch every day. But if you're,
I can't imagine.
If you like Kubrick and stuff like that, you'll understand like what,
Well, yeah, no, he was definitely like an artsy fartsy guy.
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. I mean,
Clockwork Orange, right? He did that.
No,
that wasn't Kubrick, was it?
No, I don't think so. Man,
it wasn't.
My film buff like stuff is like.
This is the end of the podcast. For the
yeah. I was in Star Wars mode. I didn't want to talk about other movies. I wasn't prepared.
So many good films out there I would like to discuss, but yes, back to Star Wars. I'm gonna let you be the you're gonna be the lore master. Let's talk about it. I'm gonna let you have the foundation.
You're like we start with the original trilogy, and then if you're a kid around if you're around our age, so I'm 36. How old are you?
36.
36.
We're
right?
old men.
Yeah, we're old men.
We're young men thinking we're old men.
Yeah, but so after the original ones come out, then you had the special editions were re-released in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of controversy at the time about those because, hey, we're updating the visuals, but also that's where Han shot first type stuff gets changed.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, exactly. One of the most controversial things.
I was too young to understand what they meant by that, but no, like...
It's almost become a meme now.
Yeah.
The whole thing, like the discord around it is so ridiculous that it's gone off the rails probably by now. But
that was probably the only drawback, right? Like, I guess I didn't grow up with the Jim Henson, like, because that was everything 70s, 80s. You know what I mean? Like that was the realm of special effects. And then 90s came and we're starting to get into computer imaging and
there was some CGI in the 80s, but really the 90s. I mean, we launched into a new thing, and that was the thing is Lucas saw some of that. Lucas watched Jurassic Park. Him and Spielberg have always been close. I mean, they did Indiana Jones together, obviously, also amazing series.
We can talk about that. we can do a Jones podcast too.
Absolutely. But he saw that.
You're speaking all my VHS childhood, by the way.
I know, right? It's all there on the tapes, Kids, there was rewinding. Do you know what rewinding is?
No idea.
Not in the real way.
You're spoiled little bitches.
But he came out with them, and obviously there was some good things. If you watch the special, which nowadays it's really hard to get the original cuts, but like the special editions,
you'd have to go to like a.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think at some point they were saying that they were going to offer original cuts on like Disney Plus, but I don't think they're up there anymore.
It's probably not even a priority.
Thing. I can't remember anymore. It's whatever. I've seen them all. I've seen the original 3 so many times that it's hard to remember what was there and what wasn't there now. I mean, it sticks out. Obviously, a bunch of CGI stuff running on the screen obviously was not there. But like small things. But Empire, for instance, is like one of the least changed. Like there's not a lot of changes to that. Okay. But in the first, in A New Hope and in Return of the Jedi, there are some major changes. For instance, famously, when they get to Mos Eisley, and him and Luke first get there, and there's just like they're riding in the speeder, and it's just like a long 3-minute shot of just a bunch of CGI shit all over the screen.
Like just plastering it.
Yeah, dude. The joke is like you can't even see what's going on the screen sometimes because he's just put so much like CGI animals and stuff. It's like I can't even see what I'm supposed to be seeing. So,
what a place to hang out, by the way, might I add.
Oh, Mos Eisley?
That must have been a scary place to hang out.
Dude,
you had to be a hard thug to feel comfortable.
Absolutely. I mean, in old expanded lore, for instance, after Greedo got shot, the bartender like turned him into a drink. Like his body into a drink, and like it became a huge seller in his Mos Eisley cantina.
So not only did he capitalized on himself. Not only did he get to clean up the bone and sinew, he sold it as a beverage.
Yeah, he sold it as a beverage. Apparently, it was delicious.
Oh my god!
But
put a belt on the man.
Yeah, I wonder if being in like the Mos Eisley canteen in that cantina, do you think you would get real bored with the music? They seem to only have the one band, right?
It was a banger.
Yeah, it's a banger. But imagine listening to that for 24 hours. Yeah. I don't know. There's only 2 bands in the entire Star Wars universe, anyways. There's that one, and then Max Rebo, the one in at Jabba's.
Jabba, yeah.
Those are the 2 only bands, and that's it.
Every time I hear the one you just spoke of, it reminds me of the Puff Daddy song. Oh man, I'll have to think of it later. I'll show you after. Like the beat, the way it sounded. Yeah. Although he did sample a lot of 80s music, so I'm sure it probably had some sort of influence. But that place had to be absolutely bonkers,
right?
Which kind of goes into it goes into that question that we answered at the beginning. Luke or Han. I think that for those that chose Han, you probably were wanting a little more detail on Mos Eisley, right?
Yeah,
probably. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, maybe a little bit.
Like if you're like, I enjoy the Western, bounty hunter. Western, smuggler kind of vibe that I feel that, and we can discuss later, that the newer
stuff is
expanding on, which is cool.
But I also think that with Han, because when you're people who love Star Wars and things like everybody, Star Wars, especially the old ones, were so perfectly positioned to be everyone loved it, in a way, but the people who like the real nerdy, people who got super in and asked questions like, hey, I want to know what's going on with that random background character and stuff. And like gets expanded on majorly.
You needed an encyclopedia for that.
I mean, I have those encyclopedias. I got them.
You didn't bring them?
I thought about bringing like the weapons and ships like manuals that have all the weapons like broken down.
If we do another Star Wars cast, bring that stuff.
Oh
over.
Yeah, we'll just sit there. You'll have to make it into like a video podcast that we're gonna have to post on YouTube. So
I need to look into doing that.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I just don't know how easy it seems difficult. It's. I haven't done any research, but it seems like I would record something on camera, which I have. I have all the gear to do it. Mm-hmm. But then I'm recording 2 separate things at once. And then I've got to I have to edit everything perfectly.
How do you mix the sound and stuff like that?
Well, I imagine it's 2 separate tracks.
Yeah.
But like doing it in a way where it just seems really difficult that I don't feel like tackling right now. Maybe after I finish my bachelor's degree, I'll look into it,
right.
But I'm not terribly. You were talking about going into the deeper.
Yeah, Han and Luke question and going into the deeper lore and stuff. Han was cool, Han was cool. He always had the cool lines, He always knew, what to say. He was a gunslinger, He was a little, obviously darker and stuff. Not afraid to shoot a guy, He
was cool,
like
gray.
That. Yeah, exactly. And obviously, also by the end of it, he gets the girl as well. And so, like, that's who you wanted to be as like a nerdy kid growing up if you weren't cool. But secretly, and then as Luke is true.
Han is such a piece of shit, dude.
Well, yeah, Han is a piece of shit. That's what made him.
As
cool.
an adult, and it's funny because as an adult, I watch it now and I'm like, Han, you're a piece of shit, dude.
Yeah. In the expanded lore, like, I don't want to get nitty gritty into like old expanded lore that doesn't even matter. Into it. But
if we're in the air, talk about it.
In the old expanded lore, this prince from like this area of the galaxy comes to court Leia. Down there, he's from the Hates Consortium and stuff, and he's the prince of like that area. And he comes and he makes this huge overture, brings like all these battleships that he's gonna like hand over to the fledgling New
Alderaan.
Republic, you know, and things like that. And he's asking for her hand in marriage. He's fallen in love with her from afar. So what does Han do? He takes her and steals her away and literally kidnaps her. And then they crash land on a planet, and various adventures happen because of that. They end
This
up
is in a book?
yeah. It was
Okay.
it was in like multiple like
This is after Yavin?
yeah, after
Okay.
Yavin. So like there's a long like what happens after that and like
What a
how
savage.
I know, right?
And a piece of shit.
Yeah, I mean that's what we were saying. He's a piece of shit, right? But it's
That would
piece
not
of
fly
shit.
in 2024,
Oh, absolutely
dude.
not.
No.
Absolutely
Canceled, bro.
not. Yeah,
You're done.
But hey, guess what? She ends up married. They have they have 3 kids.
Sometimes you got to shoot your shot.
Hey, they got 3 kids out of it, so good for them. You know.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
But you know, for me, Luke was always the truth, the way. You know, the way to be, man. You know, and Luke and you know when I you know and as the old expanded universe happened, Luke just got more badass. You know, he got even more calm and cool. Luke got his own girl, you know, in Mara Jade, you know, which was one of the best love stories that you know Star Wars ever did.
Which series is that?
That was in the expanded universe, like all the books and stuff. It was a slow burn.
Which was so it happened over multiple
Yeah,
series?
it happened over multiple. So there's different, like, you know, the books all would have titles. Some of them would be like one-shot books that had one adventure following the gang. But then others were multiple books, you know, like the Thrawn trilogy was famously.
So the Thrawn trilogy, are you talking about the old one or new one? Because they're both
Old
Timothy Zahn, right?
Yeah, old one. The old.
The Heir to the Empire and all that?
Yeah, all that.
So I read those and I couldn't get into it.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what it was.
They're not really good as far as like the writing style and stuff. The prose of it is not like.
Ooh, you hit prose.
I know,
You hit prose.
But you know, it's fairly. It was written for kids, you know, like young teens and stuff like that. So it's more of like a simpler writing style, closer to, you know, like if you compare like Lord of the Rings to Harry Potter and the writing styles.
Oh, for sure.
Both, you know, fantasy series, but one's for kids, one's for adults, roughly. And so it had that, but like the stories and things like that were solid. Like that's why they're now kind of mining some of that. That's why Thrawn is still a thing in the modern, you know, canon,
right? Because
he was such a good character.
Yeah,
you know. But you know, so you had all that and things, and in that Luke got even cooler. You know, he got more awesome Star Wars. But there's like talk of how somebody tried to push him with the Force at one point in those books, and he was so rooted in the Force that it felt like trying to push the black hole at the center of the galaxy. You know,
yeah,
like that's how they compared him in moments like that.
I try, you know, I think now that Disney has establish what's canon. I think it's difficult for someone to be like, here, read this standalone Legends book and not get lost in, like, I feel like for me, I would have a hard time not differentiating, you know, what's canon, what's not, but like accepting that this is the way it is. But
yeah, I mean, the modern
canon, I hate that they did that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's a very it's a complicated conversation about it, and it's hard to like nail down. Like I agree, like it'd be hard for me, like if I had a kid and I was like, hey, I want you to read these, like you'll like them, but also they don't matter, you know. Like how do you tell that, especially to a young kid, like how do you tell them, all right, you need to separate this from this and stuff like that. So I just kind of hold that stuff as my own thing. But what I wanted to get to before that is, so prequels, right? The episode 1, 2, 3.
So is there anything else you want to talk about for the old trilogy?
Not right now. We'll get back to it.
All right, we're
going to connect it to something else going forward.
We just had a quick nicotine conversation. And your question was what?
My question was, my question is the 3 main characters, Luke, Han, Leia, do they smoke cigarettes or use nicotine in some way? And if they do,
let's pretend in the world they do use nicotine.
Yeah. Luke
is a dipper.
Okay.
Not because he's trailer trash, but because he needs to breathe.
Okay.
Because he's just, you know, he's a saber fighter.
Okay.
Han Solo, he don't have to move that much. He's shooting. He's a smoker.
Yeah.
Plus, he's like the West vibes.
Okay.
Leia, cloves.
That's pretty good. So in my mind, Luke was a dipper because he is trailer trash. Backwater thing. But once he becomes a Jedi, he stops using nicotine. Right?
What does he use then?
He doesn't use anything because he's the Jedi master. Yeah, he uses the Force to get high.
Which I'm sure is the thing. There's got to be a thing,
right? And then Han was always a snuff
So,
Yeah, you know, so,
okay.
yeah, that's what I always thought.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, right. Just
man.
snorting a little bit of
When I was watching Inglourious Bastards, I was thinking Brad Pitt was doing coke the entire movie.
No.
I was like,
no.
I mean, if you're over there and you need to stay awake, then
the entire Nazi army was doing meth. So,
hey, if you want to get stuff done efficiently, you put them all on meth, man.
Yeah,
that's how you take over the world.
that's true.
All right,
and then Leia was definitely a Virginia Slim with the cigarette holder, like she's Hunter S. Thompson.
Oh man, classy.
All right,
classy gal.
So prequels, right?
Hold on, before we go on.
Okay.
So it's safe to say that the original trilogy, at this point, at least in our lives, we can both agree, laid a foundation as far as expectation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, that's, it's the beginning, the alpha and the omega, right? It's all of it right there. People have, you can nitpick with Return of the Jedi and like, obviously.
I don't care what anyone says. This is awesome movie.
I love Return of the Jedi too. When I was like real little, that was my favorite one just because I loved all, big space battles, big.
Well, it was the finale. This is the moment you were waiting for.
Exactly. As I got older, I appreciated the other movies more and stuff like that. But, I think all three of them are unassailable in my mind, right? And then, so right around this time, now I'm in fifth or sixth grade is probably when episode 1 came out, right? And I remember when the trailer dropped. And like, this is before the internet and things like that. And I remember going to a movie. I don't remember what movie I was seeing. And I remember that came on the screen. And of course, because I'm a kid and because I don't have access to all the stuff we have now, no idea that this is about to happen,
You're right.
And it just comes out. And I remember those Gungans coming out of the mist at the very beginning of it. And then the music hits and you realize what it is. And there's all these images. Who's that lady with the white face paint and like the red on her face? What is that? What are these droids? Like big army of droids. What's going on here? What are these space battles? Is that a lightsaber? I don't know. Oh my God. We're getting more Star Wars.
Did you get Maul? Did we get Maul in the original trailer?
In the original trailer, I think we got his face. We definitely did not get the double lightsaber.
Oh, no, I don't even think that was in the trailer.
No.
I think that was a full-blown surprise.
Full-blown surprise, because I remember how surprised I was.
I remember grabbing my brother's shirt, like, on the chest and going, like in the theater watching it.
Was me, my dad, and one of my best friends when that movie came out, right? And I remember going opening night, waiting in line, AMC 30, right there.
Shout out AMC 30 Bel Air.
Shout out AMC 30 Bel Air. Because that was the nice movie theater at the time. And going there and seeing it and standing in line. And I remember that was the first movie I remember standing in line for, Like, I don't remember standing in line for any other movie before then for an opening night. And I remember seeing it and just... I don't even remember what my small mind thought at the time. I just remember coming out of it and just like I didn't have words. I think my whole body, maybe I became sexually awakened at that time. Maybe that was my first sexual experience.
Enlightenment.
Enlightenment right there. And I just remember being blown away. All the new, CGI and all the stuff. Wasn't thinking about like story and anything like that, you know, and just being like, this is the greatest thing that I've ever seen, And then some time passes and you get older. And then episode 2 comes out. And episode 2 comes out and I watched it and you're like, this is cool. This is nice. A little weird. What's going on? Hey, that's a purple lightsaber. Never seen that before. Awesome. Right? But, you're thinking of all this. And then by the time episode 3 comes out and I'm in high school, you've really had to sit with it for a while. And at the time, I hated episode 3 because by then the shine had come off. And even though I don't think episode 3 is the worst of those 3 movies, it was like by then, like I was just ready to hate it, Now that I'm older, and this is, what I wanted to get to is like our thoughts on the prequel trilogy. Because our thoughts on the prequel trilogy growing up with it is different from
this is where we diverge.
Yeah, it's also different from the younger generation as well, because there's like this whole camp of younger people on the internet and things who are like prequel trilogy apologists. And if you're about to reveal to me that you're a prequel trilogy apologist,
what is that? Explain what a prequel trilogy apologist.
It means that there are there are takes out there that like, oh, episode 3 is better than Return of the Jedi, or stuff like that. Or like there are people who there are legitimately young people out there who think that the prequel trilogy is better than the original trilogy. No joke. Okay.
That's the apologist.
Yeah,
that's the apologist viewpoint.
Or they're they may not even be that intense about it, where they're like not willing to go that far, but they're like, no, like this is fine. They're apologizing for the acting, they're apologizing for the writing and things like that. And looking at it now, especially as I've watched more movies, because I'm a pretty big film buff. I watch a lot of movies, and just like, man, George, what were you doing with that script, man? What are some of those lines in those movies? Like, those movies are, I love Star Wars more than anything. It's my number one fandom. I've grown up with it the whole time. The prequel trilogies, I'm saying right now, live on air, they're bad movies. All three of them are bad movies to varying degrees, but they're bad movies.
Okay. I need you to leave. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
No, I wanted to have this discussion.
Okay. All right. Let's go to 4, 5, 6. Okay. 4, 5, 6 to me laid the infrastructure of everything.
Okay.
That's the foundation.
Yes.
Because that's what we were given first. I believe that, and I haven't looked this up. It may be true, may not be. Maybe I heard it somewhere and I put it in my brain and thought of it. I don't know. I imagine that George Lucas had 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, and 3, the story's rough draft in his head before even going to 4, before even making 4. I imagine. If not when he made 4, I imagine in the making of 4, 5, 6, he had some premise of Anakin's rise. Like, he had a general idea. Mm-hmm. Maybe not every little thing. I'm not saying Queen Amidala was the one that he loved, but I imagine that there is something there. He knew something was there.
Okay.
Now, things that I appreciate about 4, 5, and 6 is as we talked about, the foundation of the characters. You had Luke, Han, Vader. You had, this was the standard, or this is where our characters are. These are who they are. That's something that will not change. When he made 1, 2, and 3, these are the things that I appreciated, because there's lots of things I don't like about the trilogy, but there are things that I think that are better than 4, 5, and 6. One of which is the choreographed fighting. If you go back and watch 4, 5, and 6, those duels, weak sauce. I don't care what anybody says.
Absolutely agree. I absolutely
Have you seen the remake video of Obi-Wan and Darth Vader?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, if you want tears.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean,
the soundtrack.
I do not disagree with that take at all.
That's not the only thing, though.
Okay.
So, but no, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, I agree. Obviously, the visuals and the CGI is way better.
Mm-hmm.
You can argue like how much realism should be in Star Wars, and that became a talking point in the sequel
realism
trilogy.
Are people talking about that?
Actual like making models to make ships and like puppets and things like that.
Gotcha.
If you watch the sequel trilogy, they re-added some of that because that was some of the magic of Star Wars that people felt was lost over time.
Right.
Instead of it all just being green screen, right?
I don't think that bothered me that much.
It doesn't bother me either. Okay. That's not a problem. And yes, the choreographed fights, obviously the duel between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul is probably the best duel in all of Star Wars as far as lightsaber combat.
Especially when that thing was introduced.
Oh, dude, I mean, we lost our shit. We've talking about.
I shit myself.
Yeah, all right. Like that's where I saw God for the first time. So, like, yes, the technical aspects of the prequel trilogy, there's a lot to be lauded, and some of it is better than the originals. However, first off, George Lucas, as much as he likes to wreck on it and sometimes say he had all this in his head, he absolutely did not.
He didn't have any idea he was doing that?
Episode 4, like A New Hope, was a movie that he made.
It was a standalone?
It was a standalone.
Okay.
It was on a shoestring budget, and things like that. And he had no idea if it was going to be successful. The idea of a movie franchise hadn't occurred to him yet because he didn't know if it was going to be good or not. Nobody knew that Star Wars was going to be as good as it was.
I did. If you would have asked 6-year-old me, I'm like,
exactly,
this is a banger, bro.
exactly.
Don't give up.
But back in like the late 70s and stuff, nobody knew that this was going to work. Nobody knew that it would spawn a franchise, and things like that. So yes, after he started writing 5 and 6, and like and you got to remember also, like the thing about Lucas is he's a great idea guy, like the big picture idea guys, But like Empire Strikes Back was not written by George Lucas, it was written, by Kasdan, and things like that. So there are other writers.
Did Kasdan write New Hope?
No. George Lucas wrote that one. So that was all him. But like his ideas sometimes got in the way of. So that's why 4, 5, and 6 he had collaborators that were able to rein in some of his more outlandish ideas and like bring him back down and be like, hey, this is how a movie needs to be structured. This is how it needs to be written. Here's some of the dialogue. You can't be having people talk about that. The problem with the prequels is it's George Lucas run amok. Right?
Oh, he had
full control. He wrote all of it. That's why the dialogue is so weird. That's why you get lines about sand being coarse and like, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil, and things like that. Like those lines are from George Lucas, right? That's why trade taxation and like Senate politics are such a big part of the prequels, is because he found that shit interesting, but like everybody else was like, this is boring as hell. Like, what are you talking about? So from what
I think from a child standpoint, yes.
I also think as an adult, like
I'm talking about like the trade Senate and the political stuff.
Yeah.
I find interesting, and as an adult, not so much as a kid. I definitely was like, where the fight's at.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, like as a kid, you just want to see boom boom splashy splashy, bang, bang, like all the big stuff.
Thank you, Disney. No.
Yeah. But you wanted to see all that stuff, and then there was all this like minutia and things like that. But even from an adult perspective, like just the ideas of it doesn't work. The fundamental flaw that he did with the prequels, in my mind, is so 4, 5, and 6 is Luke's story, right? 1, 2, and 3 should have been Obi-Wan's story. He should have been the main character, and then the overarching story between all three of them is the rise and fall of Vader. But Vader and Anakin is not your first person, like, I'm following him around. Some of the worst parts of the prequels is him being on the planet with Amidala by themselves, and they're just like,
I have my reasons. Well, so yeah, I guess to kind of put in what you're saying, I had no idea that, and this probably just shows how much of a fan of Star Wars I am. I didn't know he had a writer for 5 and 6.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel, and I make a joke about this all the time, is that he should have definitely consulted a writer.
Yes.
At least for the purposes of dialogue, for those specific scenes. I'm not against the romantic scenes. I'm not against that. I think it has its place and it has its importance in the story. But it was very cringy, the things that they were saying.
Exactly.
And I think that me and you both will definitely agree that the things that they were saying back and forth was just like, oh my God. I understand what we're doing here, but it's very hard to watch.
Yeah, I absolutely, like, I'm a sucker, romantic comedies and things like that. Like, I'm not against romance in movies at all. And if you're going to make it about Anakin, even though I don't think that should have been like the main focus, but if you're going to make it about him, of course, like Padme has to have a large part in that, and that's fine. But like we said, it's just him writing it on his own. He's not a great writer, is the thing.
Agreed.
Like, George Lucas does not have that toolkit. He doesn't have that tool in his bag, right? And so a lot of the problems with the prequels comes down to the structure and to the writing, and it brings down all the good parts that we do like about it, and then by the end of it, and the problem is like, you have to have Anakin have the heel turn into being Vader by the end of
heel
it.
Turn. All right.
Right. Bring in some WWE just to make it feel
What are
at
you
home.
doing to me right now?
But when that happens, and when you have him make this like heel turn, it has to be, like they have him kill the younglings, right? And it's dark and stuff like that. But he sounds like, by the end of it, like a whiny teenager, at the end of it. Like,
yeah, because he's not a teenager. He's an adult.
Yeah, he's an adult man with a wife who's about to have a kid on the way.
Yeah.
And so, just like the fall of Anakin in those movies is just so ham-fisted and like weirdly, like there's
executed.
There's no subtlety to it. And later, you come out with, like, much later, the Clone Wars comes out, the animated series, and like fleshes out a lot of that stuff and makes him a more likable character. And the problem is I think people can't separate like animated Anakin in that series versus what the 3 original movies were. They're like, oh no, Anakin's a great character. And I'm like, Yeah, in like this extra stuff that we added later on because we realized he was a bad character, and so I really feel like the prequels, like it's fine to like the prequels. I like the prequels in some ways, but for to objectively like think that like they're like good movies is just disingenuous to me. It just is to me, because like I've watched them a million times, just as much as I've watched every other thing in Star Wars that I love, and it's just like it never gets past like, this is good, this is okay, this is fine, but never do I feel like that spine tingling that I ever got from the original trilogy.
So I would agree with pretty much everything you're saying in regards to how things were executed in the original 3. And I think a part of me being such a fanboy of Star Wars gave me the ability to kind of separate the things that I didn't like about them and kind of accept it for what it was, and really kind of embellish in my head the things that I did like, and kind of put that on a pedestal, which made me appreciate 1, 2, and 3. Everything that you're saying about the writing, or at least as far as like the dialogue, how Anakin was portrayed in the movies as he was portrayed in the show, which is a point that I would like to kind of go into, is that when for the casual Star Wars watcher that watches only the movies, the viewer has no idea what's happening outside of the main battalion missions or the main objective of the missions. Like, we watched 4, 5, and 6, but we had no idea what was going on in Alderaan at the time. We don't know what was going on in Mos Eisley. Like, we don't know what's going on with these other for when I was a kid, everything that was on the Star Destroyers was the Empire. Mm. But as an adult, you're like, well, the Empire's got a home base.
Yeah.
They're somewhere. There's a political system somewhere.
Yeah.
And even though we see Emperor Palpatine and we see Darth Vader, they are not the Empire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they are a hand of the Empire, of someone, a big hand, the hand.
Yeah.
Like, they are the executioner of what they want. But there is a whole other dynamic to the Republic, the Empire, the people who are affected by this war in 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9 that we don't even get to see in the movies, because the movies are only focusing on like the forefront of what the story is about. Good.
I think that hits on exactly what the problem is of the originals versus the prequels, is the fact that 4, 5, 6 had, there are expanded stories from the old canon about like what happened in between some of those movies. Because, time passes between like A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Like, stuff happened. How did they get to Hoth? Like, why are they there? And things like that. And
your 3 paragraphs at the beginning of the movie is not enough for me.
Right. But like, there's stories that flesh all that out, and they have like little adventures and stuff. But like you said, they're not. You don't have to know. Like, that's nice for a big Star Wars fan, but it doesn't like change how the movies function as movies. With the prequels, the problem is a lot of this extra canon stuff, whether it's Clone Wars or other like, extra media, kind of becomes essential for you to enjoy and understand the characters on the deep level that you understood Luke, Leia, and Han on. And that's what a flaw. That's a major flaw if you're writing a franchise, is because like I should not have to, like, I should, as a casual fan, I should be able to watch episodes 1, 2, and 3 and understand completely what's going on, and like the characters and have all of it. And I shouldn't need supplementary material to have to look in on to understand all the context of what's going on. Like Ahsoka, for instance, if you watch the prequels, like, there is no indication at any point in those prequels that Anakin had a Padawan ever, Right. And yes, it makes them more likable, their relationship and things like that, as you learn more about it. But like, I shouldn't need that to like Anakin.
Right.
It should hit you when he turns evil.
So
the problem is it doesn't.
So the thing that I was like saying about like there's different things that are happening outside the movie and in the movie, I think that in the movie they focused, and I understand it's a problem, they focused more on Anakin, how he felt directly in a microscope with his relationship with Obi-Wan and the Jedi Order, and how he was struggling with Padme and this dynamic. And so you see this person who, and you're going to hate me, who is madly in love with Padme, right?
Yeah.
He's been taught that he cannot have this relationship.
Yeah.
It is so taboo, and everything that the Order is telling him is not to give in. And the reason why you can't have these relationships, because it's put you in these emotional predicaments that you have great power. And when you have these strong relationships that take over your heart, because when you love something, you will gamble everything to save it, right?
Absolutely.
And so in the movies, it was really microscoping into that struggle with him. And I think that the Clone Wars, like, as people might think that these are two different Anakins, I think it's the same Anakin. You're seeing the Anakin in the Clone Wars as a teacher and a general.
Yeah.
Or whatever his rank was. You're seeing him as an operator out on the field.
Yeah.
So he's not thinking about Padme.
Yeah.
He's thinking about badassery. He's out there and he's doing what he needs to do as a Jedi Knight in the field of battle. And so I think that those two Anakins are one, and I just feel like the movies don't do a good job. And maybe that's just me being a fanboy and like wondering, like, is he really like this? And maybe it's okay for the casual watcher to be like, well, Anakin's just a whiny baby, whatever. And not understanding that there's a whole side to him that we don't even get to see in the Clone Wars that they didn't portray in the movies at all.
Yeah.
Then I think that's what made the Clone Wars so cool and good, was that you got to see who Anakin was outside of this relationship. Just like you see me as a nurse at work, but you don't know what I'm doing outside of work. I mean, I could be a serial killer. I'm not, but like, there's a whole thing. That's why I brought you here, to murder you. There's a whole side of like different people that you don't get to see. And I think that the expanding universe, and we can go into this later, that Disney is doing the necessary work to kind of fill the holes in, because the universe of Star Wars is so huge. You cannot encapsulate everything in a 2-hour movie every 4 years. And so that's where, and I feel like that's why they need to do shows from this point forward instead of movies, unless you're doing a huge blockbuster like thing.
I got you.
So I say that to say, like, there's things I was willing to overlook in 1, 2, and 3 to basically accept the overarching idea of what the story was. Everything, his relationship with Obi-Wan, and as cringy as some of the dialogue was, to the finale, how we know it ends, even holds an emotional dagger in my heart, because I'm able to because I just love it so much that I push all the negative down to really look for the shine. And it's easy for me because I'm just I just love it so much. It just has such a hold on me. It sounds really bad that I say that, but I really, really enjoyed 1, 2, and 3, but there were some really dark things that I didn't like about it. Have you heard the Jar Jar Binks theory?
Yeah, I've heard the Jar Jar Binks.
Do you think that it's legit?
No, I think absolutely not. I think
you don't think it's legit?
I think somebody came up with it on a Reddit meme somewhere, and it's just there.
So I'll explain the Jar Jar Binks theory for people that, for my -3 listeners. Jar Jar Binks is this silly character that everyone basically hated in the original 3. And the theory is that he was supposed to be Palpatine's next in line apprentice as a Sith, who was basically playing double agent.
Yeah.
And I like so it sounds crazy that like people are like, well, I don't like it because he was a silly character. Have you watched Naruto, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Obito with
yeah.
Whenever he first said who he was and that lightning struck and you saw the eye behind the mask and he wasn't being silly anymore in the Village of Rain, I got goosebumps, bro. I paused it and I walked away and I was like, everything I thought I knew, I don't know.
See, this is...
and I feel like that was they could have done that with him. Like if he changed his voice and he was like, yes, like something dark, and I'm like, oh my God. Like I probably would have collapsed.
So...
I know it's probably not true, but if that had happened, I would have been completely blown away. Even though I love Dooku and Tyrannus. Like, I love that character.
Yeah. Okay. So, first off, hitting on the Naruto thing for a second. First off, I think the moment some man showed up with only one hole over one eye, I was like, oh, that's Obito.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I knew that twist.
I'm so glad I'm glad I'm dumb.
it just immediately like
I didn't know what it. I didn't piece it together. I didn't know what it was.
But tying that back into like the Jar Jar thing, right? And like the theory that he was like a Sith Lord masterminding all this from the beginning and stuff like that.
But it makes sense though, because he was there with Palpatine in the very beginning. You read Plagueis, right?
See, yeah.
Okay.
I think people want it to make sense because it's more interesting than the actual story we got. I'm telling you right now, at no point was George Lucas big braining this and thinking that he was like, Jar Jar's really the bad guy. I was like, no, he's not.
Can I use this for an example of why the internet sucks as far as movie making? If you notice, and this is kind of off topic, if you imagine, and this goes with anything, whether you're talking about professional wrestling or you're talking about any story like in a book or a show or a movie, you have people that put out pretty cool ideas and then that kind of gets viral. Yeah. And so the expectation, and some of these ideas are from people who like are really awesome, like have creative viewpoints. Yeah. And then they fall short of these creative viewpoints, and then we're left with something that wasn't necessarily as good, and we become disappointed. Yeah. And I feel like YouTubers, podcasters, or anybody that has like a voice, a platform on any of these medias, like it's so hard to make a product that no one else, like, because you just have these people who intervene, not purposefully, but have their idea, and their idea is probably better. And you live up to that expectation, then it's not, and you're like, damn, that wasn't good.
Dude, I mean, when we get to the sequel trilogy, this is going to be a big conversation about like, fandom, like interference and like things like that. But
I say that to say with the Jar Jar Binks thing, like I feel like that's an example of like what the problem is when it comes to like these stories, is that people have a bigger voice than they should, but it creates false expectations.
Yeah, there needs to be a dialogue with fandom. Right, like it's healthy to have a dialogue with your fans about like what they and get feedback from them. It's a balancing act of realizing that like yes, you can come up with like a fun idea on the internet, but like implementing that in an actual. Well, I'm just saying like movie makers, directors, writers, things like that. Like that's their professional job for a reason. Like we work in the medical field, and like I would not have just because somebody like thought they knew what they were doing in medicine doesn't mean I'm about to let them take over a critical patient. And just like
which happens all the time.
Civilians come into the hospital all the time. And
when'd you go to medical school?
Yeah, you're right.
Was it before or after you walked into the hospital?
And that's the thing is because like just because you're a director or writer doesn't mean all your ideas are good, right? And like there are bad, movies. Obviously, there are bad, like books, television, whatever medium you're talking about. So just because you have that job doesn't mean you're good at it. But at the same time, it's a fine line of like, yes, you should have feedback from the fandom, and yes, they should have some input, and like you can, understand what they like and what they don't like, and then like work off of that. But when you take that too far, you get stuff like some of the sequel trilogy, like things that happened that really like had a huge like divisive, and then Star Wars fandom was changed forever for a lot of reasons. But with the prequels, like I said, there are certain things I agree that Anakin's story of the love and being a Jedi and like understanding how like yes, you could go too far for a love that you have, or something you want to protect, and absolutely in like with a philosophy and a feeling of what you think, the Force is, and like how you're supposed to be able to, separate yourself from earthly attachments to be able to serve, as a Jedi, and there's a lot of talk about like, and also the Jedi, as we know, like became too much, about their doctrine and less about like helping the people.
They should have separated that. That was the biggest mistake of the Republic. I feel like
what
was involving a religious, sect into
making them too closely tied to the government.
Yeah, because now you've got to. Yeah, I mean they were being used as mercenaries essentially.
Yeah,
and they were essentially monks, is what they are.
Yeah, they were filling way too many roles and things like that.
It was
inappropriate. Spread too thin. It was inappropriate. Is what it's separation of church and state. we
took that way too seriously. But that was incredibly inappropriate, and I feel like that's what led to a lot of that BS to begin with.
And I'll admit now that like one of the we haven't talked about like what like led us to our opinions. For instance, there's this great, we're talking about fandom and like how like stuff on the internet can influence things. For instance, like some of the ideas that I'm postulating right now in this podcast, there's these great videos. I highly recommend them on YouTube of what if episode 1 was good, and then he did one about what if episode 2 was good, and he did like a.
Does
full
he talk about
writers-
what made it?
Yeah. He basically postulates just like a basic script, with a little bit of like character drawings and stuff, but starting in episode 2. But it's just a guy on the internet talking about like how he would have gone about like doing episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and they're excellent, and he makes some great points and things like that.
What is the channel called?
I don't know what the channel's called. I don't even know if he's still around as like, because this is old videos.
Oh, you just send it to me
like
in text or something.
Yeah, I'll send it in a text or something. But just like, what if episode 1 was good? If you type that in YouTube, it'll pop up, and then all 3 of them are right there.
I don't know how to type.
No, that's fair. I mean, you are dyslexic.
I am. I think to some degree.
So, the other question I wanted to ask with the prequels, though, is so they exist. Whatever our opinions are of them. How do you rank the prequels as far as like
On a scale from 0 to 10?
No, not on a scale from 0 to 10. Like the prequels, like which
In
of
order?
the 3 prequels is the best, the middle, and the worst?
I would say probably Attack of the Clones is probably the weakest one.
I absolutely agree. Me and my friends have had much debate about this. A lot of people will
There's
say
things I
episode
like
1 is
about
the
it. I
worst.
just don't think I don't think enough happens character wise. Like we get the clones, but like there's not. I don't feel like there's a lot there for me to feel like anything had moved forward.
I agree. I think first off, Anakin is at his most annoying in
Yes.
Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
The dialogue is the worst. In
Oh
that
my
one.
God.
It starts the trend starting in episode 2 that continues into episode 3 until the very end of episode 3 of Obi-Wan's just kind of off doing side mission quests. He's not.
He's in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
He's got a war to fight.
Yeah, but that's it, right? Like the whole thing is like part of it is not only Anakin and Padme's relationship that you're supposed to focus on, but also Obi-Wan and Anakin's. But for most of these movies, they're not,
Together.
They're not together. In
Yeah.
episode 1, he barely knows him because Qui-Gon's the one who brings him on. And so like he barely knows this kid and just kind of gets handed him. He's like, hey, you're going to train this kid at the end of the movie. He's like, oh, okay. And then episode 2, like, you have time skip forward and like you're supposed to, feel like they have a close relationship, but you didn't get to see that relationship build because there's time skip. And then he's off like investigating, this clone army and stuff by himself while Anakin's like with Padme, building a relationship with her. And however successful that relationship is portrayed, at least they're showing it. And meanwhile, Obi-Wan's just off doing his own thing. And then they meet up again for the finale of the movie. And then episode 3 is kind of the same thing. They have like the big space battle at the beginning. And then right after that, it's like, all right, Obi-Wan's off to go fight General Grievous on his own and like do this. And you're like, oh, well, okay,
Yeah.
So for me, Clone Wars is the worst for all the reasons we said. And then episode 1 is like the middle ground. I think part of that also is just nostalgia. Like we said, I saw it on opening night, so even though it has a lot of problems, like I said, the final battle against Maul is amazing.
I think that was probably the saving grace.
I might be in the minority. I love pod racing. I love
No, it was exciting. It was
It's
exciting.
super exciting to me. I love the whole just like
It was
weird-
something different that they put in there that
Yeah.
that was actually
And that
interesting.
shows George Lucas's good qualities. Like that whole just idea of just like big old engines pulling this little sled behind it, in the desert with that noise. Oh man, the noise still gets me. And plus I love the pod racing video game, as you can remember, like in the arcade, and you have the controls and stuff. I love it. So all that, and then episode 3 is probably the best one because it has the finale to it. It has the most emotional. It's probably the best written of them.
I get choked up, dude.
Yeah.
Even though the dialogue is a little weird, but like just the idea. Of those
exactly. So like it did the most right out of all of them. And so I think that all, is the correct order for those movies.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Did you ever watch the original Clone Wars animated, the Jindy Tartakovsky like small shorts?
I did not.
Man,
Are they good?
they're so good. They're on Disney Plus now.
I see. Yeah.
And I they're like 10-minute little episode, like vignettes, basically. And they first off they show how awesome General Grievous was in those, because in the other one he's just like an asthmatic, it's like robot that you're like who's this guy? Because you just get introduced to him, you're like who's this guy? And why is he breathing so hard and stuff?
Because he wasn't in 2, right? He was only in 3.
Yeah, he's only in 3.
Okay,
and so but it introduces him.
Yeah.
It also shows why he breathes that way, because Mace Windu force choked him to almost near death, and so and there's just amazing like fight scene. If you love action, if you love just like, there's so many cool little things in there. I think it's one of the best like extra, like outside of the mainline movies, one of my favorite like little Star Warsy things that just kind of exist. It's so much fun.
I'll have to look at that.
Highly recommend it. Yeah. So that's the prequels. Right.
So quick things I like about the prequels: music, the fighting, and essentially how they just wrapped it up.
Yeah,
it was what you expected to see. It's what you needed to see.
Yeah,
I feel like that was, if there was a point of doing the prequels, it was to show their relationship breaking.
Yeah,
as to what happened. Yeah,
yeah. So. Like I said, I have a lot of quibbles of how we got from point A to point B, but like you're right. Like a lot of that is, unassailably cool, and just like as a Star Wars fan, you love to see it. You know? And I think that like, the prequels, they have their place. I'm not saying they're worthless or anything like that. I'm not.
Yes, you are.
But I have problems with them. I have problems with how the modern fandom is kind of bringing them like they look at it with more rose tinted glasses, than I would look at them. But overall,
because you demand a certain quality of picture.
Well, I'm just saying I like good movies.
Don't make shitty quality stuff.
Don't make shitty quality stuff. I don't know.
Does no one give a shit about the rules anymore? So are we going to talk about the beloved 789?
Oh, are we? Are we going to talk about 789? Because this is where I feel like a lot of the meat comes in, especially as like.
I would say there's certain things about 789 that I do like. I really like.
Same. We're gonna have. I think we're gonna have. This is probably gonna be our biggest divergence. is about to happen right now.
Well, honestly,
there's gonna be like there might be a fist fight.
Well, this is the best trilogy, so.
All right. Well, sit down. Sit down. You're already sitting down.
I need to pee before we do this.
All right. So, sequel trilogy. Here we go. So first off, set the stage a little bit, right? So prequel trilogy had now, by the time that like Disney, when they bought Star Wars, right? The prequel trilogy had been panned by a lot of the fandom, but there was still a love of Star Wars, like a huge love of Star Wars, right? And obviously,
so time before that. So at least from my perspective, after the original trilogy came out and the new, the second trilogy, the prequels, for me, my relationship with Star Wars revolved heavily around video games and the expansion outside of the main, like the Rise and Fall of Vader era. Mm-hmm. So like a lot of Old Republic stuff I was really into.
Yeah.
I know that your focus was a lot on post Yavin and the continuation of Luke and Legends. For me, my relationship was going back.
Yeah.
Back. I think that did you look into a lot of like Old Republic stuff or not really?
So a lot of the Old Republic stuff, right? A lot of the whether it's post Yavin like Legends era canon and stuff like that, a lot of that came out before the prequel trilogy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Including Old Republic stuff. Like a lot of what you like the foundation for what the Old Republic was and things like that came out in that time period.
Yeah.
Then the prequel trilogy came out, and then like KOTOR, which is obviously probably still the best Star Wars game ever.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good, right? But also its story and things like that became so good that it literally became canon.
Yeah,
it filled out parts of like the Old Republic trilogy, like the Old Republic story. I mean, not trilogy. And
they made a whole MMO.
I know,
based off of because how successful that story was
exactly.
with KOTOR.
By the way, those trailers for that MMO are still some of the best.
Like, they're so good. Did you ever play that game?
No, I never did.
Part of me was itching just to download it again.
Yeah.
It's free to play.
Yeah, it's MMOs. I have a strained relationship with MMOs.
Yeah, me too.
I got two.
It's like an
addicted to
abusive
MMOs.
marriage. Yeah.
And so I'm reticent to go back and have it consume my life.
When I go back, I usually will make a character and just do the storyline, and then once I complete the storyline, I done. Like I don't try to do like our in-game boss and try to get and do all the raids and stuff because I'm past that.
Yeah.
Like there was a long my first half of my 20s was all about MMOs and that kind of grind, and oh dear God, I'll never get that time back.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so that was my relationship with Star Wars prior to the second trilogy or the new trilogy.
Yeah,
but I said all that just to kind of
I think
segue into
a lot
what I
of
was
people, Clone Wars was around that, had already been released and things like that. So people had a relationship with Star Wars, but they were really what everyone wanted was new movies, right? Like there's all the extra, because it's still the flagship. It's still that's what Star Wars built its bread and butter on. Everybody wanted it, right?
Yeah.
So Disney buys it. They plan, to do it, some input from Lucas, but really they're running their own thing. All right.
So I won't lie. When it was announced that Disney had bought it, I was very happy.
I was too.
Because I was like, the big budget.
Yeah.
Which means they're gonna put all out for writing. They're gonna put all out for effects. They're gonna have best soundtrack. Like
they were saying all the right things. They were like, hey, here's who's gonna direct episode 7. Here's who's gonna direct episode 8.
One of my faves.
J.J. Abrams.
Yes.
All right. So they had
that is the man who should have been at the helm. We'll get into it. But watching, I don't know if you ever watched Lost.
Yeah.
Whenever I watched Lost, that was my first introduction to J.J. Abrams.
Mm-hmm.
All of his Star Wars references, like I used to joke around, like he should just he should just do the next Star Wars.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, when he made the Star Trek movies and things like that, everyone knew,
which are phenomenal.
I like them. But the Star Trek movies, everybody knew that he really wanted Star Wars, right? Like that was the buzz going around.
Yeah.
So we're all excited, right? We're all like, J.J. Abrams, man, you can have it.
No one better.
Then they had Rian Johnson, set to do episode 8, and he was this up and coming director and stuff. And then at the time, I believe it was the director, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was the guy who was set to do episode 9 at the time was the director of Jurassic World.
So their intention was to have different directors for each movie.
Each one, right? So that was
my question is why.
So like I said, original trilogy.
But J.J. Abrams wrote. Didn't he write 7?
He did. He
wrote?
He had other writers with him. I can't remember. I know they brought in the original writer from Empire for episode 8. Okay, and then 7. I can't remember if it was all J.J. Abrams and things like that. But they were going to have 3 different directors for all 3 of them, and which worked because you got to remember the original Star Wars trilogy. George Lucas, wrote and directed the first one, but then there were different writers and directors for episodes 5 and 6. Okay, so and it worked great, obviously. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of their plan, right? And they go into it, and they were saying all the things that every Star Wars fan wanted to do. We're going to use more realistic effects. It's not all going to be CGI. A lot of the stuff that people had been saying for years that they didn't like about the prequel trilogy, they were like, we're going to fix it. We're going to do this. We're going to tell a new story. We're going to do all these things. And the hype's building and the hype's building. And, I'm right there along with it. This is like music to my ears. Like you just said, when Disney announced it and then they started saying some of the stuff, I was like, this is what I wanted the whole time. Right. This is all I wanted.
Right.
And so opening night happens. Episode 7 comes out.
So before you go on forward, let's talk about each episode. So when go through what you liked about opening, watching it, takeaways, and then we'll go back and forth and go through each episode that way. Okay. Because I feel like that's where we're going to have probably the most deviated opinions, I feel.
So episode 7, right? First one comes out. Practical effects, amazing. Rey as a character, amazing in that first movie.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Finn, amazing as a character in that first movie.
Oh, yeah.
Old Han, awesome in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Old Leia, awesome in that movie. It's great. Do I have quibbles with some of it? Absolutely. My main quibble is it a little too much like New Hope 2.0?
That's what it was.
Absolutely. But at the time, none of us cared because it was Star Wars again. You know, it felt like Star Wars. The dialogue felt like Star Wars. The characters had the energy of Star Wars. All of it was cool. You had Kylo Ren, weird mask guy, the big reveal that he's actually Han and Leia's son. Awesome reveal. When he kills Han at the end of that movie, awesome. Like all of it.
That surprised me.
Yeah. Well, Harrison Ford gets to go out like he always wanted because famously Harrison Ford wanted to be killed off after Empire. He was like, my storyline's done. And then they gave him a bunch of money and he came back for Return of the Jedi. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't. So that was going to be the end of it.
Harrison Ford pushed forever, like back in the day.
I mean, I feel like that's a good idea for an actor when you're dealing with big cinematic universes, because then it becomes a part of your identity. You get caught up in having to
Absolutely.
So
well, it was a combination.
Behind
Harrison
the curtain,
Ford's
it's a good
career was really taken off because he's one of the greatest actors of all time.
ruggedly handsome bastard.
Yeah, I mean,
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, talk about like rags to riches. Carpenter turned out to be the biggest movie star in the world, you know. And so, like, all this is happening, and it comes out, and it's so good, and it's so everything that I wanted, right? From there, and you're so ready. And even with the quibbles of, hey, you're kind of just blowing up another Death Star and things like that, who cares? I didn't give a shit. I was
I did not.
This is awesome. These new characters, I love them. I was so in on like Finn and Rey. I was like, these guys, like the acting, you know, Daisy Ridley and John Boyega were just blown. I was like, these are going to be A-listers. This is awesome. Like, they're so good. They're so charismatic. All of it's good. You got Oscar Isaacs in there. Like, all great.
He was for me the star.
He was awesome. You know, he had a more minor role in those movies initially, and it was great.
I love his character.
Yeah, but you could see where, you know, and it was like a handing of the reins. You know, Han's now by the end of the movie, he's dead, but like you're handing off, and they ended off with, you know, her confronting Luke, and you have no idea where it's going, and you're like, bam, here we are. Star Wars is back, baby. Like, we are here. This is what we wanted. Then they come out with Rogue One, right?
Hold on. So let's stop right there.
Okay.
All right. Everything you said, I right there with you. From the trailer to her walking up that mountain, I was impressed by everything. I knew it was by the end of it, you're like, okay, this is basically New Hope. But so Rey and Finn, I think they're very charismatic. I don't think they're very good actors. There's these moments when I feel like there was like the touch of Disney whenever they were, how do you explain it?
Were they too quippy, too MCU quippies?
Yeah, like they would have this dialogue where they like the curtain was like it was kind of opening up a little bit, like you weren't sure, like they were trying to like play off of something and kind of like take the audience out of like in the moment. I would have to go back, and there's several moments where I was like, why did you do that?
So for me, for actors, right? The way I look at it is like the actors and the writing, right, go hand in hand. Like, it's sometimes hard to separate, you know, what's good acting and like what's the problem with, you know, like with the prequel trilogy, how good of an actor is Hayden Christensen, but then how bad is the writing that he's stuck with, you know, like who's to blame, right? And it's hard to sometimes separate that. So I agree. Sometimes the writing in that movie is a little, and J.J. Abrams, you know, his movies, they don't always, you know, they're not like high, you know, art in their writing.
Academy Award winners.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not getting
they're not quite that, but
they're
like
bangers.
The feeling of those characters, you know, we were talking before we started about like the One Piece live action, for instance. There's some dumb lines in that thing. You know, you're making a live action anime and stuff, but those characters feel like what they are. That's what everybody in the fandom is like. Oh man, like this is like, even though they're different from like what the source material is, it feels like Luffy. It feels like the crew, you know, and things like that. With them, they felt like Star Wars characters to me. Okay.
So outside of that, I feel like everything was good. I felt like the cinema, when I think of like cinema, like I think about camera angles, how they're shot when they're focusing
on cinematography.
The cinematography is very, what's the movie with, what's the Godfather? What's his name? It's not Good Morning Vietnam. Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now.
So like a lot of the cinematography stuff, like how they like move the camera and like do things, was very much like Star Wars to me. Like when the scene when Poe Dameron's flying in and right before Kylo Ren takes Rey, how they focus in on him and all of his maneuvers and having but still having Finn in the focal point, but having him and how like he is having effect. How Poe is shooting at different things, but saving Poe, but keeping both in the angle. Like how it was just so majestic.
I agree.
Everything was just perfect. It was everything I wanted Star Wars to be, like on steroids. It was like, dude, this is amazing.
The most important thing.
Like I'm getting goosebumps right now.
The most important thing is for it to feel like Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Like
which
it
they
doesn't
did.
have to be perfect in every aspect of filmmaking,
right?
But it needs to feel like Star
And you were right
Wars.
with the dialogue. Like when it was almost they picked up immediately where they left off, and we almost forgot about 1, 2, and 3. Like 1, 2, and 3 didn't even matter.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like
because
it was such a breath of fresh air. Right. It felt like Star Wars, in a way that the prequel trilogy I feel didn't. Right.
And the last thing I'll say before I have nothing else to say about episode 7 was that I feel whenever Game of Thrones became mainstream in an HBO show, Martin was able to introduce a gritty, like it doesn't discriminate who you are. You were always up if the bell tolled for you. And that became almost mainstream. Like before that, if you look,
I would say it did.
Yeah, because like before that, if you were a main character, you were safe. Like majority of the time you were safe. Yeah. And Martin did a really good job, or not Martin. Martin was going to be Martin, but HBO took the gamble and put it up in mainstream, and everyone loved that. If the bell tolled for you, the bell tolled for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when Han died, which surprised me because I'm thinking like the rules won't apply here.
Yeah.
But when they killed Han, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I see what we're doing here.
We're off to the races, right?
Yeah. So for me, I was like, this is now the expectation.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to walk the dark path.
Well, and it was absolutely the right move to do too.
Oh, absolutely. If he didn't die, it would not have been the same movie.
Not only does it serve the story, but also it's a metaphorical handing of the reins to the new generation.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. It's like the original actors are old at this point. Like that's why like a lot of the Legends canon and stuff, as much as I love that stuff, there was no feasible way at the time.
Unless you recast, but then it's not the same.
Yeah, without recasting and things like that, which, will cause so many issues in the fandom if you're like, all right, well now Sebastian Stan is Luke Skywalker or something like that. Like, and whatever your feelings on any of that is, the point is that it would have been a massive thing if they'd like recast Han, Luke, and Leia.
I don't think, and so I guess that was a part of what I was nervous about whenever they first dropped the trailer, was that how are they going to show? Not, I don't want to sound like an agent.
Transition from the old generation to the new generation.
Yeah, which I think they did gracefully in the first movie. But I was nervous because you are dealing with an aging cast. Mm-hmm. And if you don't pass it on, it could be hit or miss.
Exactly.
And I think they did it gracefully. And I think that if Han didn't die, I don't think that movie would have been as good as it was.
I agree.
It was the necessary evil, as much as it hurt me.
Yeah.
And really pushed Kylo forward in regards to who he was and what his commitment was to the dark side.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved the whole inversion of like Kylo Ren is like the opposite of Vader, where he is like from this good and decent, Vader had like a falling and things like that, meanwhile Kylo Ren chose to fall, like Anakin, chose
the elements
to
were there.
I know, it's all there.
The elements were there.
It's all there.
Why?
So then we get, after that, right, Star Wars is back, right? It's introduced to a whole new generation. The old fans are happy. New fans are getting into it. Oh, man, we've never been riding so high. Right? Then Rogue One comes out. And Rogue One, standalone story. Still probably the best shot Star Wars movie in my mind. The cinematography in that movie is unbelievable. The effects are good. I think a lot of the characters are fun. It's a contained, easy story to tell of just like the plans for the Death Star and things like that. A lot of new characters are introduced that are super fun. You got some real like bangers, like people, shooting half court shots as far as like, the droid in that movie and things like that. He's awesome. And all these things are coming together. And like now they've done like this standalone story. So now you're like, oh man, we can do a lot of stuff with this. We can make movies about like a lot of different things. We can explore unexplored areas of the fandom. We don't have to have Jedi in every movie. We can do,
I'm just kidding.
I mean, I'm
biased.
It all.
I'm biased.
I love Jedi too when they're done right and stuff like that. But I also
that's the thing for me is like, if you're to me, what makes Star Wars is the Jedi. And if you're gonna take the Jedi out of the story, which is fine, you can do that. You better bring it, bro. Because what separates this than Star Trek? Because the new Star Trek movies were bangers, and you're gonna not like it. Rogue One, I didn't quite care for it as much. The best part for me was like the first 15 minutes or so, where you're introduced to like this character and like him trying to hide, the girl, and then like the last 45 minutes, like everything in between, I was just like, I don't really care for it.
I kind of agree that like the middle is a little bit forgettable, but the highs of that movie are really high to me.
Oh yeah.
And
like the infiltration to the escape, like everything was like, oh my God.
It's not a perfect movie or anything like that, but Star Wars had never looked so good before.
Oh yeah. No, it looked good.
And also it was and like we said, it was a movie with low stakes, right? Like it's an easy enough story to tell, and it's not that hard to tell it because you know exactly how it happened.
Mm-hmm.
We have so much canon fandom and like all this stuff. We know how, you just had to fill in little gaps here and there and make it compelling enough. And they did a good job. It's not a super important movie as far as like the overarching Star Wars, like narrative, it's not important that movie exists, but it's super fun that it did exist.
Yeah, no, it was good. I mean, overall, it was okay.
So here we are, right? Now we get to episode 8.
The best one.
Reins are handed over to Ryan Johnson. Oh, maybe we won't be disagreeing as much as I thought.
Oh,
because here's the thing. Episode 8 comes around, and like we've already established, you're kind of handing over the reins from old generation to new generation in the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so everybody was wondering, what's going to happen with Luke? What's going to happen going forward with this? How are they going to do it? And then Ryan Johnson comes in, and he does, to me, he blew everybody's expectations out of the water. At least in my mind, episode 8 is by far the best of the sequel trilogy.
Okay. What were things that you liked about it?
The things that I love about episode 8 is not afraid to take risks. It's the riskiest movie in like the mainline like movies.
Give me an example.
For instance, having Luke be an old curmudgeon, who doesn't want to train people and stuff like that. Because everybody's expecting Luke to be a badass, right? Everybody's expecting Luke to be he's at this point, like when he's old and people were like, what's old Luke going to be like? They're like, oh, he's going to be like Yoda. He's going to be the new Yoda. And he's not, No,
I think he was perfect.
Yeah, I think he's amazing.
I think that relationship between him and Rey was the exact relationship of how that generation feels about our generation.
Right.
I feel like that was the most realistic way you could portray. And I feel like that was almost like, in a way, that was them allowing him to break the curtain of how he really felt in general. I feel like his personality in that movie was how he literally probably felt about the state.
Maybe so. Mark Hamill loves Star Wars.
Absolutely.
He's always been like writing. He's not like Harrison Ford, who Harrison Ford kind of had to be dragged.
Oh my God,
screaming into it. And
he's
stuff.
such a snob.
And it's kind of he's kind of mellowed out on it and things like that. But he's always, even from when he was in the original trilogy, he'd be like, "This fucking stuff is stupid."
I'm just really good at my shit.
I don't understand. I just want to make good movies. But Mark Hamill's never been like that. He's always been the most embracing of the fandom of anybody, and things like that. So, but I understand why people felt it was controversial to portray Luke that way. Your hero growing up as a kid is now an old broken man who's like feels that the world is like at the beginning of that movie, he is just disillusioned with everything, right? He's completely checked out. He's like, there's no saving it. I'm not like some savior that can come in and do all these things.
It was real.
Like yeah. And that's what I loved about it. It's
It's
like it was like a punch to the head, of like, oh, this is what really happens sometimes. Sometimes people like try their best and they fail. And that's what happened. Luke failed to rebuild the Jedi Order in this continuity, right? And now it's up to your new main character in Rey to bring him back and show them that there's still hope, And that's what like Star Wars has always been about, is like hope versus tyranny, and
Right.
fighting against these forces, against incredible odds. Episode 8 is not a perfect movie. Like I told you how much I love Rey and Finn in the first movie. Finn gets kind of sidelined. He goes on his own little adventure. They introduce
I did not appreciate that whole adventure.
I don't think anybody did.
I feel like that was like Pod Racer 2.0, but kind
not
of
as
fell.
good. Yeah. The character that they put him with, I can never remember her name. Very forgettable. Now that actress got way too much hate. There was legitimate toxic like fandom going on with her, where they were like harassing her online. After
Oh my
that movie
dear
came
God,
out.
people are stupid.
People are stupid, right? Like, and that's like far and beyond. Like, you can dislike that, but like, we just talked about the prequels. I don't think Hayden Christensen was very good in those movies, but I would never like tell Hayden Christensen that he needs to go kill himself, or something like that. And people were legitimately doing that.
Yeah, those are stupid, toxic people who are miserable.
Stupid, toxic people, right? The other problem is obviously during this, you're setting things up with some of this, and right after that movie, pretty soon after it, Carrie Fisher dies. So like, what you're setting up going forward is like might be a little harder to pull off now, because one of the main characters, because it was the first movie setting up the old threesome of Han, Luke, and Leia. The first movie, Han is like the main character of the old guard, and then Luke is the main character of episode 8, and then I think they were legitimately setting up that Leia was going to be the old. The last movie was going to be about her, and her handing off the reins
To Rey?
to just
Whoever?
the new generation.
Gotcha.
Not a single person, but like they were like having their last moment in the sun. One by one, and like first it was Han, then it was Luke, and then it was that. Episode 8 is also the best looking of the sequel trilogies to me. I think it
so,
takes
yeah.
the most risks. The fight scene in the throne room.
Good.
I love that they killed off the
Snoke.
Snoke.
My thoughts that I'll go into, but
I loved it because I loved the idea of like Kylo Ren, Ben Skywalker is faced with the choice again to like turn against the dark side, and instead what he does is like embrace it even more and try and pull Rey with him, and they've had this push-pull relationship the whole time with their connection, right? And so the things I love about that movie are, like I said, I love how Luke was portrayed. I love the visuals of it all. I loved Kylo Ren and Rey's like relationship. I loved the twist of Snoke doesn't matter, because we're all like, remember after episode 7, everybody's like, who's Snoke? Who's
that's
Snoke?
the point. That was one of my points that I was trying to say about why the internet sucks.
Yeah.
Is because everyone was like, who's Snoke? What's the mystery? And they're all writing their own narrative. And so
Exactly.
you're expecting like this grand reveal when really the intention was never
matter.
there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you've now set it up, and then things I didn't like we said, I don't like that Finn was kind of sidelined with his own story. I think if you're going to have a new, threesome with, him and Rey, and then, Poe is also kind of like there as well, and you're telling all these stories, Finn like being kind of sidelined. The main characters of Star Wars are always best when they're together and playing off each other, and of course they have to have for long stretches of Empire Strikes Back, obviously Luke is just with Yoda by himself, but like you have to like
There was
have them-
that served a bigger purpose though.
exactly, and so having him do this like random thing didn't really serve a purpose. It's not great.
I feel like
Yeah, it's the biggest gripe that I have in that movie.
and it really didn't even serve that big of a purpose. Like they could have summed it was just a problem, like because it was like a security code or something like they needed to get.
Yeah.
And they could have just did it in a different way that I feel like dragged the movie out. I love long movies, but I feel like if you have a long movie, make everything necessary.
Exactly.
Like, and I feel like that was unnecessary. I feel like it was just dragged out.
Exactly. But at the end of this movie, right, you have Kylo embracing, the dark side even more. And Rey kind of firming her resolve, like, okay, like I tried to get him. Now it's my job to basically kind of put him down. Finn gets sidelined a little, but he comes back. Him and Rey's relationship are still strong. And then most importantly, and I think this is what Rian Johnson did the best with this movie, is at the end of this movie, you have a small scene where a little boy who was on that planet that Finn went to, and he pulls that broom with the Force, and it shows, and it's showing not only the handing off of the old guard to the new guard, because you got to remember, yes, it was the Skywalker like saga, up until then, but like we said, a lot of these characters are older now. They're handing off the reins to new, so you have to like hand it off fully. It has to be given to this new generation. And the other thing is that if you love Jedi, and every Star Wars fan claims to love Jedi, I love Jedi, you love Jedi. Jedi like was not a family blood thing,
right?
There were hundreds, thousands.
The Force
of Jedis.
Is a pool. The Force is a pool. It doesn't belong to the Skywalker
the Force
lineage.
Is like an energy field that surrounds and binds us, and all those things, right? And so anybody can and it's also a story of rebellion, as it's always been since the original trilogy. And so anybody can fight against evil,
Force or not.
Force or not. And and if you have the Force, you might have to fight a little, you have a bigger role to play and stuff like that, but anybody can do it, right? Anybody who wants to stand up against injustice can do it in the Star Wars. It's the ideal, the platonic ideal of like what we wish modern society was, that anybody can like affect change, right? And like all you have to do is be willing to do it,
right? And
we're set up for such an amazing, like final movie with this, right? And then the movie comes out, and it's. Are we talking about 9 now? No. We're talking about 8, right? It comes out, right? And like it makes a bunch of money. The critics like it a lot. I think it's still of the sequel trilogy. I think I can't remember if episode 7 or episode 8 has the higher Rotten Tomato score, but they're both like really well liked by critics. The problem is after the movie comes out, the fandom starts to like debate it online and like in videos on YouTube and like anything. And that's where the worst parts of any fandom start to come out. And Star Wars has a bad track record of sometimes the fandom really like lays into it. And they tore that movie apart. People who didn't like how Luke was portrayed were loud on the internet. So many people were loud about that movie. And it got so loud, and the discourse got so toxic around it, that Disney became afraid, and they changed what they wanted to do.
See, okay. Okay. All the things that you liked about The Last Jedi, I liked. Mm-hmm. My only complaint is that, and as much as I'm entitled to my complaints, I don't think my complaints bear any weight or at least any validity for them to take into account that, all right, then this needs to be changed. Like, I'm just some dude who's a Star Wars fan, like whatever. Mm-hmm. My biggest complaints about the movie was that I feel like there were things in the movies that was not explained or even dissected or even given to me at least as a Star Wars fan. I felt like episode 7 did a lot in regards to like setting up potential characters or potential stories to unfold, and even explanations of imageries that you were given in episode 7. Mm-hmm. For instance, when I went into 7, I thought we were going to get a little bit of who the Knights of Ren were, who Snoke is. I mean, I never expected him to be a reincarnation of Palpatine or someone else. Like, I'm sure he was just some other, like, was he Force sensitive? Like, I don't even remember.
Snoke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So I'm imagining he was probably, but who was he? So if you have, and this is where I start getting into it, where my Star Wars nerdism starts to go into the canon and try to dissect it, because you have rules in Star Wars. Like, okay, there's the rule of 2 with the Sith. So who is Snoke? If you're a Sith, I imagine if you're a Sith and you know that you're Force sensitive and you decide to embrace the dark side, you probably won't announce yourself. You know what I mean? If the rule of two is the rule of two, and you acknowledge that, and you see the two that are there, and you're a Sith, you're probably waiting for your opportunity to strike to get into the two. But I just wish that there might have been a little more like backstory of who Snoke was, because I felt like his death didn't really mean anything to me, because I was like, well, I don't even know who you are. I wanted to know, but I don't even know who you are. And then you didn't even give it to me, so I was just like, okay. It just didn't mean anything.
And I get, as somebody who's been deep in Star Wars fandom for as long as I can remember and dissected every little thing about Star Wars, I understand the need to know every little detail about everything. And like to have these characters, well, what was this person doing? And what was that?
Before you go, is there any books that are out there that explains who Snoke is? Is there anything out there? Like I haven't seen anything.
So I'll be honest, I didn't read a couple of the books. There are books. There was a book released right around the time of episode 7 that kind of like is a prequel to episode 7, kind of. I think it's based off of like somebody who's like a fighter, like a TIE fighter pilot for the First Order and things like that. I think maybe nowadays there is a full explanation of who Snoke is. I think there is out there. I think I've looked at it before and seen it. I'll be honest, it's not that interesting. It doesn't really, but the bigger point though, that's problem with it is, so Snoke serves Kylo Ren as the character. I don't really care about Snoke because Kylo Ren's the character I'm interested in.
Right, exactly.
So his death just serves to build Kylo Ren's character and his motivation. So it doesn't bother me as much, but I understand why it would bother people to not have any explanation.
Well, it just didn't bear any weight.
Yeah.
Like it was just like some old withered guy, and you don't. And my thing is this: is like when people write stories, and this is just me, like in stories in general for anything, not just Star Wars. There's a purpose for you showing Snoke on a image, you know what I mean? Talking to Kylo Ren in the first movie. There was also a reason why you made him big as fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're giving me everything that you're doing in regards to what you're showing me is for a reason. And you're showing me Snoke, who is basically above Kylo.
Yeah,
and I know
he's
that
the master, Kylo's the
Kylo,
apprentice is like the idea.
And even though Kylo's destiny was always to get Snoke, we knew that was going to happen. I didn't have any doubt that Snoke would kill Kylo. We knew what was going to happen. But you didn't bear him any weight. You gave me this idea, okay, this dude's a bad dude. All right. And then in 2, when you see him in the room, like, oh, dude, we're about to get some sort of explanation. And then it doesn't happen. And then I was just, I felt like I was robbed. I was like, well, who is this guy?
No.
And that to me, that was just like one of my biggest gripes. The fight was awesome. Everything was good. I was just like, what? I just feel like it was a mishandling of a story.
That's fair. Okay. So this is where I think, so first off, in a canon standpoint, the rule of 2, right? So that was Darth Bane implemented the rule of 2 after
goddamn right.
Yeah, goddamn right. So Master Apprentice going forward. But then after, and it was all the way up until, the Emperor and Vader, right? Once they take over, like the rule of 2 exists because,
Was it for secrecy?
Well, it was initially. It was to keep them, on, the reason they did it was for survival.
So now it's not necessary?
To keep the Jedi from wiping them out. Once they take over everything, they still implement it as like the Emperor and Vader were the master, the hierarchy, and apprentice, and they were Sith. But you got to remember, especially now that we have a lot more canon and stuff, there's a bunch of dark side people running around, with lightsabers that are under their control. They just don't call them Sith, right? They're dark side.
Yeah, like Inquisitors and
Inquisitors, whatever you want to call
even
them.
Grievous wasn't even a Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. So in the sequel trilogy, I always saw it as like Snoke is the master, Kylo Ren is the apprentice, and then the Knights of Ren are like dark side force users.
Oh, absolutely. Were they Force users?
Yeah, I think they were supposed to be.
And I wanted so much more because they looked badass.
Well, this is where we go to our big point. The point that we like to think about when people make movies and when people write this stuff is that they always had it planned out from the beginning. The dirty secret is they don't always have it planned out from the beginning. And that was Disney's biggest problem is they didn't have somebody who was in charge of being like, hey,
all 3.
We need to be A, B, C, these points need to be hit. You're still going to be able to do whatever you want in the movies as long as you have the spine, the spine and the sinew needs to stay leading towards this.
Right.
And they never did. Or if they did,
That was my biggest complaint.
They completely ran away from it, towards the end. So that's the biggest problem. Like, for instance, you showed like you were like, well, why is Snoke so big in that image and stuff like that? I thought it was a cool image. I don't know why he was big either.
Maybe just because it looked cool. I don't know.
Exactly. Sometimes like directors and people like that do stuff because they think it looks cool, but they don't have like an idea. They're like, oh, we'll figure it out later, type stuff.
I'm too analytical. That's my mom's fault.
No. And I think all of us as fans of this kind of, anytime you have something with like a big lore, whether it's Lord of the Rings, whether it's this, Harry Potter, people want answers to everything, and stuff like that. And sometimes when you get those answers, they're like Hogwarts didn't have toilets,
but
and everybody just vanished their poop. They pooped wherever. And
if the answer's no good, just give me an answer though. I feel like there wasn't even an answer. Like I was just like,
that's what I'm saying. Though. It's like that's where you have to kind of like, is it better to just leave some stuff a little unanswered, or do we need to overanalyze every detail? Because by overanalyzing it, are we cheapening what we have?
Okay.
But going forward, like episode 8. I think had an amazing, like, you had an amazing finale written there. You had a lot of threads you could pull. Then the fandom got involved.
Hold on. Before we go on to 9.
Yeah.
Is that where we're going to 9?
Yeah.
My one thing that I would change, and you might not like it, what would have made that movie so much better, at the very end, Finn should have died.
You think so?
Yes. I think it would have been a necessary evil because I feel like his role... Not even before I saw 9, I feel like, and it goes back to what I was saying about Martin, because they pulled the trigger on Han, and so I'm like, okay, from this point forward, we've already entered a dark realm. Like, I feel like that should be a standard. Nobody should be saved, and I feel like that would have been a necessary evil for me to be like, damn, dude, like these dudes are like hitting our people off.
So.
And I love Finn.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it should have been him, because he was such a lovable character. Like, I feel like you just don't hold back and punch right in the gut every single time.
I think it depends on what your medium and what kind of story you're trying to tell, right?
I like darker stories. But, yeah.
Well, and that's just like what appeals to you as like what gets your juices flowing, right? For me, for me, I love like the no holds bar in a story like Game of Thrones, right? Where like nobody's safe and things like that. It's great. Right?
I thought it was coming whenever they were like, the camera's like, dude, is he about to die?
Right.
I was like, is this about to happen?
But Star Wars has never been that from the beginning. It never has. It's always a story of good triumphing over evil, right?
Yeah.
And so it's fine for me. Like, that's why you kind of had your cake and you were able to eat it too, type thing, because you had the older characters that you could either kill off or have them go away as a handing off. But the new generation like could take those reins and they didn't have to necessarily die. You could still have big impactful deaths,
right?
And like that's why the Han death is so good, is because it hits you hard because it's Han dying to his own son, but also like it makes sense, like from not only just like, the mechanics of, Harrison Ford's old now and he's kind of done with these movies anyways. So like, it makes sense from there. It makes sense for Luke to die and things like that. He's also old and like, he doesn't, he's not a paragon of like virtue and justice like he used to be. He kind of came back for one last hurrah. You got to remember Star Wars was always based off of, the original Star Wars is based off of Kurosawa movies, which are basically just Japanese Westerns, and so
I did not know that.
Yeah. That's why, the whole, like, that's why Jedi are kind of like samurai, things like that. It's all based off, like, that's where he got a lot of his inspiration from. He cribbed a lot of that from there. And so with them, I don't need like character deaths or anything like that, but I do need the characters to matter. And I do agree, Finn, if they would have killed off Finn because of how they kind of did him dirty in episode 8, it would have been okay with me, because you weren't really doing much with the character anyways. So, that's fine. But the bigger point that I'm leading towards is, as you're leading into episode 9, right? Whatever plans they had for episode 9, nobody really knows. There's a lot of reporting on it, entertainment reporting, speculation.
Maybe we'll get a Zack Snyder cut.
Right. But like, what was the plan going in? But clearly, and it's been widely reported, and we know for sure that at some point they were afraid of some of the backlash they got. The backlash got really toxic. Like, I remember it really well, about like Episode 8. People were like sending death threats to Rian Johnson as the
Oh my
director.
gosh.
More of that kind of shit. But instead of like sticking to their guns, Disney backed off, and then they're like, oh man, all right, well, JJ, you're gonna come in and you're gonna direct this other movie.
What a fucked up pitch to give JJ.
I know.
Like, what?
I don't know, and I don't know how much of it was him, how much I don't know how much
maybe,
of it was
yeah, I
like
guess you're right.
directed down, being like, hey, you have to do this. I don't know how much of it was his own bad ideas. But then you get episode 9, which in my opinion is the worst Star Wars movie by a country mile.
So, yeah, I think either way you put it, how it happened, why they changed it, you definitely can watch 9 and go, is this even part of the same story?
It's just,
like, it doesn't even make any sense.
Confusing.
It doesn't even make sense.
The prequel trilogies, I like have massive problems and stuff, but they make sense.
Well, no,
as a
this
story.
had like no continuity.
It had no context. Literally, one of the lines at the very beginning is like, somehow the Emperor has returned. It's
the most
been memed to
tacky,
death.
the most tacky
Yeah.
catch or kitsch camp way you could
Yeah.
possibly think of, 80s style,
Yeah.
like just
It's ridiculous.
B-listing opener line.
Yeah, it's so bad. It's so bad. And the hilarious thing is in old extended canon, like in old Legends canon and stuff like that, guess what? The Emperor does come back.
Yeah.
He comes
Yeah.
back as a clone of himself and stuff.
That's in the
But,
era of the Empire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like okay.
But like that was all like building,
Yeah.
during the Thrawn trilogy, there were like dark rumblings of like,
Yeah.
hey, they're all amassing, here and like what's going on. And then it was done in a way that like, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous for there to be a clone of the, but it's Star Wars ridiculous. It's still, it fits in the world you've built.
Right. I feel like it could have been done, but like you said, you didn't incorporate it in 7 or 8.
At no point.
And it didn't even have
Yeah.
to be like blaring. It could have just been something in the background or like, because people analyze video. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people analyze things, and you could have easily said,
Yeah.
like you could have dropped like a cryptic line in episode 8 to suggest that this is even possible, just so if people are like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Well, actually, in 8, if you listen to what Snoke said, like that's what upsets me the most is that you could have made this work, even if that was the end, and y'all knew that was the end.
Mm-hmm.
The execution in between was absolutely terrible. So I don't know what the plan was, if that's where they wanted to go or they changed it. Either way, it's not good.
I'm of the opinion, and everything that I've read, that they absolutely like pivoted at some point.
That's so
and
crazy.
It's so, oh man, it just, it's so bad because like it's so bad. That movie is so bad and ruins it so much that it retroactively like ruins the other movies in some ways. Like the warts of the other movies stand out bigger because this movie is so bad to me.
So is it bad because the story is bad, or is it like, I understand the story is, well, okay. Is it bad because of how the story pivoted? Because I feel like you could have made that work if, I'm always a fan of you always can make things work. Is outlandish. If we played a brainstorming game and you said, this is A, B, and C, connect the dots to make it make sense as like if we were trying to do like a D&D thing, like an exercise, like a storytelling exercise to like just engage your imagination. I could do that, right? Even if those were A, B, and C, 7, 8, 9, you could have made that made sense. I feel like you could. I feel like you give me 10 minutes and let me watch these movies and come up with something. I'll pitch it to you.
I think you could have made it make sense if that was the plan from the beginning, and if you had somebody who had an overarching like idea of this is where we're going to end up,
Right?
Which we've already established they clearly did not,
Right.
because there's nothing. It literally comes out of left field, right? I don't care what kind of weird I'm sure somewhere on the internet somebody pitched that like the Emperor was behind all this or whatever, and I saw when people were wondering about like who's Rey's parents and stuff like that, which also, by the way, doesn't fucking matter who's Rey's parents.
Yeah,
are.
who cares? Because
who gives a shit? You set up in episode 8 like it doesn't. She doesn't need to be anybody.
Right.
She's some orphan.
Who's a
cares?
Force adept.
Yeah,
that
who's a
doesn't
Force
need the
adept.
lineage.
It doesn't need anything else.
Yeah.
It doesn't need anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's why I liked the Old Republic era so much, was that because it was about it wasn't so much about lineage. I mean, yeah, the lineage is there, but like anyone could be a Jedi. You didn't have to be a special person other than the fact that you had an affinity of the Force.
Yeah.
Like other than that, that was it.
Yeah,
You
the
weren't-
cool
you didn't have-
thing about
your parents could have been
Jedi
janitors.
is that they have cool laser swords and they can use telekinetic crazy powers.
Yeah.
And anybody can do it, and they're paragons of justice. It's not cool because they're all related to each other.
Yeah,
You know?
it doesn't have to be Shakespeare.
No. No. And it's just it's so galling, everything, because not only is the storyboarding of it all bad, like it's bad to have him come back. It's bad for Rey to end up being a Palpatine. It's bad to again sideline Finn and again have him do something that literally doesn't matter. It's bad to have a dagger be your map to whatever. Like all of that is bad. And then not only that, but then the writing on top of it is bad. Like we said, we already mentioned some lines. There's literally like the somehow the Emperor returned. Okay, I guess you didn't really tell me how the Emperor returned. Just like you literally said in your movie that you don't know how he returned. You literally said it in the dialogue. Somehow the Emperor returned. And then to end it with like one of my favorite like tweets of all time is this one where it's because she's like at the end she's like Rey Skywalker is her name. She tells that to that. It's like basically saying it's like my name is Rey Star Wars. And it's just so like I don't care. Like yeah, there's some cool visuals in that movie. Okay, guess what? We all know Star Wars can make stuff look cool. Okay,
Like
Star
any other
Destroyers are cool and things like that. Don't know how a bunch of them have Death Star lasers on them now and how they were able to build them and why they've been hiding this whole time and what even is the point. It seems like you guys pretty much have won.
So
why do you need to destroy are you going to have anybody to live on these planets after you blow them all up with all these Star Destroyers that can blow up planets? I don't know. It makes me so angry just thinking about it.
So okay, it's kind of a goofy concept, but in KOTOR, the Knights of the Republic, the first game, you have the Star Forge, right?
Yeah.
Which could create an army. It's kind of like the differences between sci-fi and fantasy is that those that like sci-fi, like true sci-fi people, and I don't fall under this category.
Me neither.
Is
and
that
Star Wars is, for the record, is not sci-fi. It's
it's a clash between
it's
the two.
fantasy set in a space world. Okay.
Is that sci-fi fans need a scientific explanation for things, right?
Yeah.
Well, and so, but the people who love fantasy is like, show me the magic. I don't care what happens.
For the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah.
And so my thing with Knights of the Old Republic is that there's that device that can create this thing. As outlandish and impossible as that seems, I'm the kind of like, okay, it doesn't really make sense, but in the sense of the story, okay, yeah, that sounds devastating. No bad guy should have that.
No.
So going back and having that in the movie without any explanation, I was just kind of like there was no alluding point that was revealed to us that this was even like it was just seemed completely different.
The only reason it existed was so at the end of the movie you could have a space battle. Basically,
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we got to stop this stuff real fast. Like it to put a ticking clock on it. It's like we have to stop it before this happens.
If you had shown me, and I'll say this I liked 9 as a standalone movie that was disconnected from every other movie by itself. For reasons
If
that
it was a fan-made movie on YouTube and it was like 20 minutes long.
let me explain. If taking that quote out, oh, all along Palpatine was alive, taking that out, and in a world where we weren't given the new trilogy, and somebody's like, dude, Disney has been making these movies under wraps for 10 years. Here's the last one. And you showed me that by itself without knowing 7 and 8, I would have been like, what the hell? Like, this is going to be wild. How did we get here? And then you show me 7 and 8, like, that doesn't make any sense. But like standalone, if you would have shown me that, I would have been like, oh, dude, I'm ready for this. Like, how did we get here? Or is this the beginning of something else? I could see that. I could appreciate that individual outside of Star Wars. Like if I had not known, does that making sense to you?
I get what you're saying. The problem is that like it's just you haven't like really like, well, if I was shown this without any context, it'd be kind of cool. Also,
I'm having
they
to
changed a little bit of the movie and didn't have these.
So really, it sucked.
Yeah,
you're adding too many implications here.
Yeah. But I get what you're saying. Like the bones of it like could work in the right context. Problem is that you do have context and it's
like the ending fight with them was so good, and the Roman audience of this gladiatorial event
Your
was
WWE fan showing.
well, no, like it was cool because like, oh my god, they have like a whole army of Sith acolytes here that could like. And I was like, where these people come? Like, I feel like they really could have done something.
Yeah, but they didn't have to fight them. They were just up there like audience members.
Yeah, it was just so like there was things that like it shows me that they had potential to do like crazy thing like introduce this dark world that Palpatine has been living on, who's been really been having this Sith empire that's been brewing for decades, and then you know what I mean? Like you could have done something with that, and you mishandled that so badly.
You know, now that you mentioned a couple times about how you like it when no holds bar characters should be killed off, and we talked about Finn maybe dying in episode 8. Let's talk about how the exact opposite of this happens in episode 9. Not once, twice. Twice it happens. Because first off, they're like, Chewie's dead. And I was
my God.
I was like, Chewie's dead. What
That's
a swing.
Fucked up.
That's fucked up.
I was so mad.
Oh, yeah. But then, nope, not dead. He was just on this other one because we didn't know there were 2
They should have killed him. They should have killed him.
Of course they should have. Of course they should have.
And I love you, Chewie.
Then, yeah, I mean, Chewie, I love him. By the way, in Legends, he does die as well.
Yeah. Did you like crush like a gravitational or something?
Yeah, they bring down like a moon on the planet.
Yeah.
And he roars into the sky. It's awesome. Also, speaking of Legends, we were talking about super weapons and like things like that. Star Wars has a long running history of ridiculous super weapons. Galaxy Gun, Sun Crusher, World Devastators.
The
all
names.
of them.
There's like random thing it destroys and another verb for destroy.
Yeah,
like that's the name of your
famously,
weapon.
the Empire is not good at planning out how to hold and control the galaxy. They're just like, we're just going to build a really expensive weapon and hope that nobody blows
They're the Germans, bro.
Yeah,
like,
right?
the Germans.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
They have an amazing science department.
Yeah,
and
they have great generals, but nobody's listening
like,
to
no one
them.
can execute them.
Instead, they're just like, Hitler's just sitting back there. Hitler's the Empire, and he's like, yeah, I could use these awesome generals and these tactics and all this great equipment that I have, but what if instead I just built a really big tank?
And focus all my attention on one person and not think about the entire picture.
What if I built a land battleship?
Forget Luke Skywalker. Blow everyone up to smithereens. Like, who cares about Luke?
Yeah, exactly.
You focus
He's
too
one
much
man.
attention.
But yeah, so like, man, it's just there's so many like but going back to Chewie, they did that.
That destroyed me.
They show C-3PO also getting his memory wiped, and you think he's dead. Nope, he's fine. It's fine. C-3PO is fine. Remember?
Yeah, they definitely were walking on eggshells.
Dude, it was just. It's so and it's clear that like we don't really have to go into the minutia of what's bad about the movie because we know like the movie's bad. We know the movie's bad, and like you can talk about which parts of it don't work, which parts of it don't, whatever. The movie's bad. The bigger implication from it is not only is the movie bad, not only does it retroactively make the other movies not as watchable, because when you're telling a story in 3 parts, kind of sucks if like the third part of that, it's the same thing with Game of Thrones, for instance. Like you can watch parts of Game of Thrones.
No, dude, we're about to fist fight if you say what I think you're going to say.
Okay, well, I don't want to get into too far of it, but like
the last season was the best season.
Kill yourself. But like most of we can agree that most of the general like populace who's watched that show like had a real problem with that ending and stuff, and it sours.
Are we talking about
Game of Thrones,
okay,
right? And so when you have a story that's supposed to be made in 3 parts, it literally like how it makes it so hard to go back and watch those movies. I mean, I can do it, and I have done it, but like it just ends up with me just like big sigh, like all right, I'm rewatching Star Wars. I guess I gotta watch episode 9 now, which fucking sucks. Or do I just not watch it and then like your story's just kind of hanging there? It just leaves you as a fan with such like a bitter taste and a bitter failing. And then it literally has like derailed what they want to do. Yes, they've had success, and we're gonna get into the successes and failures of like the modern now post sequel trilogy, what Disney's done right, what they've done wrong, and things like that. But episode 9 is so bad that they haven't made another Star Wars movie since then. They have one of the most like profitable, franchises in the world. You know, top 5, top 10 in the world of profitable
Easy
franchises.
top 10.
Absolutely. I've actually seen the breakdown. Pokemon's number 1 apparently.
I believe that. Yeah, no, I
by,
believe that.
by like a
because they know how to
huge-
market. It's
by a
like
huge margin.
Yeah.
Well, they also have like
Cards.
games, cards,
Yeah.
movies, TV shows.
Microtransactions
They have
on
every
games,
like
yeah.
possible media, you know, thing.
I feel like the video game industry trumps every other
Well,
industry.
the
in
video
regards-
game industry does like
Yeah.
so much bigger than
Yeah.
almost everything else.
Yeah.
But like, and so you've gotten it to where it's so it was such a misstep, and it's so bad, and it's just it's like a body blow, you know? Like you're on the mat now, man. Like it's everything you're doing is trying to now get up off that mat to like get back into fighting shape.
I feel like, to me, the positive side to that is that let's just put this era to rest. Let's not talk about this era anymore.
That's a very interesting thing, and I want to talk about that more when we get to like the modern and where we can go from here and things. But for the longest time, they were left adrift. After that, longest time, you know, it wasn't like 30 years like with the other one, but
Yeah.
they had this property that they wanted to like capitalize on, and now they're like, how do we capitalize on it? Because we just ruined it, you know.
Yeah.
So